Hello, a very warm good morning to all of you and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep. Welcome to today's the Hindu Newspaper Analysis, where we shall be discussing few of the important topics which have appeared in today's newspaper, and thereby we shall be selecting the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper for discussion. We shall be taking up these topics one by one, trying to understand the various facets and parameters associated with these topics and how these topics are relevant for the point of view of examination. From each of these topics, we shall also try to identify whether it is relevant for your prelims or for your mains examination. And as is the norm at the end of the session, we shall be discussing two of the types of mains questions which can be expected to be asked from this particular area. After the discussion, I do encourage and I do suggest to you to go to our Telegram channel and take up the quiz regarding this particular discussion that we are having in order to have a better analysis of your understanding as well and in order to retain slightly more than what you could retain otherwise. Having said that, without further ado, let us take a look at the topics that we are going to discuss today. So today we are going to discuss four important topics which have appeared in the newspaper, and we will be starting with the first topic, that is Odisha focuses on bringing behavioral and social changes to end child marriage. So this has appeared in page 4 of the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper, and this is about child marriage. So child marriage is one of the social issues that we face. So this will be under the topic of social issues, and you can expect questions from it in your GS paper 1. Then, the curious case of disqualification of a politician. This again we'll be discussing in light of the recent judgment made by the Kerala High Court and also where it stands in the entire parameter of the judgments made by Supreme Court, and what is this about disqualification of the member, which particular act of the Constitution deals with that. That has appeared in the editorial page, and this basically is from your GS paper 2. Then after that, we will be discussing an effort to go green, again in page 9, right? This is about the city of Hyderabad and the state of Telangana. They have been receiving a lot of awards globally with regards to their recognition for activities which is going to promote afforestation programs and so on. So this is again relevant for your GS paper 3. Here we shall also be discussing these awards which shall be relevant for your prelims examination, and also what are the paradoxes that one needs to notice when discussing about the green initiatives. Then eventually we shall be addressing India's sickle cell anemia and how is it that the country can basically counter it or can solve this issue, which has appeared in page 10, and this again will be relevant for your GS paper 3. So overall, as you can see, today's discussion will encompass the topics which will be included, which are important for your various different GS papers. So one by one, let us pick up the discussion, and we start with the first topic of the day, and that is Odisha focuses on bringing behavioral and social change to end child marriage. Now, why are we discussing this topic in the first place? We do know that child marriage is an issue, child marriage is a problem that we as a country, or rather we as a society, we have been facing with since time immemorial. And you have had various different reformers, even when you take a look back into history, you have had various different reformers who have worked tirelessly in order to mitigate this issue. But even today, 75 years after independence, in India, we cannot claim that child marriage has come to an end. And basically, recent developments that you see across the country, whereby you would have seen that large level of prosecution has been carried out for the cases which are relevant or related to child marriage in the state of Assam. You would have read the news story in the recent past where many people were basically locked up and jailed because of committing the crime of child marriage. So in such a purview, we are going to take a look at some of the other approaches followed by the state government, such as the state government of Odisha, where it is not directly locking people up, but rather is working at a long-term solution to get rid of the issue of child marriage. So here we shall be discussing the entire issue of child marriage, but before that, one thing that will help us to understand is basically child marriage is a societal scourge that we face. And child marriage cannot be ended with one stroke of the hammer or one stroke of the pen in the legislature. It does involve a kind of a behavioral change. So any measure that we take today, we have to take that measure keeping a long-term goal. If we set ourselves a goal that tomorrow, if we take a decision today, tomorrow the entire problem will go away, that will be something which will be absolutely not pragmatic. So that is why let us take a look at what is it that Odisha as a state government is doing. So basically, what is the problem that Odisha faces? This article also highlights the status of the problem that Odisha faces. Now, Odisha overall did record a kind of a decline in the percentage of population indulging in child marriage activities. So overall, there has been a decline from 21.3% as declared and as indicated by what? By the National Family Health Survey 4 or NFHS. NFHS 4. By the way, guys, these National Family Health Survey data, which the government releases every couple of years, this NFHS data needs to be looked at very carefully if you are preparing for your civil services prelims or mains examination. Oftentimes, it highlights the social issues that the country is facing and also the scientific research behind it. So whenever this NFHS data is released next time in the future, always make it a point that you read it in greater detail. So this NFHS data 5, that has revealed an overall improvement in the terms of the population indulging or engaging in child marriage practices. However, that development in terms of reduction of the population, that is not overall uniform in the entire state of Odisha. In the southern part and the district of Nabrangpur, which slightly lags behind in terms of developmental parameters, thereby you had an urgent challenge. The data indicated that there were close to around 39.4% girls married under the age of 18 years in comparison to the state average of 20.5% and the national average of 23%. So just take a look at this and try to understand the issue at hand. So in certain districts, as you can see, close to around 39 to 40% of the girls, they are married at a younger age. But here, you also get a snippet which can be relevant for your prelims. Here you get to understand that states like Odisha, they are performing much better as compared to the national average. The national average, keep it in mind, is 23.3%. And also, only around 15.5% women of the district, here we are taking the example of the district of Nabrangpur because that is what is highlighted in the article as well, had completed 10 years or more of schooling. As many as 50 different panchayats were identified as vulnerable based upon high incidences of child marriage. Now here, we have seen the problem, what the problem is. Right, in terms of data pointers that you see in Odisha. But the problem that you see today, that problem has not built up entirely in the past year itself. You need to understand the journey. You need to understand the development that has taken place. So here briefly, I'll take you to NFHS data given by NFHS 5. That is the National Family Health Survey 5. What does that tell us about child marriages in India? We do know that Prohibition of Child Marriage Act, that is something which is very stringent and that has basically been promulgated in order to get rid of the issue of child marriages in the country. But despite that, this is an issue which is very, very pervasive, very prevalent, north to south, east to west of the country. Now here, you observe a very interesting chart, a very interesting data. And this is a kind of a comparison. Right, a relative comparison as indicated by NFHS data given by NFHS 3, NFHS 4 as well as NFHS 5. Now in all these, you will observe what is indicated in the chart. percentage of women married before 18 years of age. And here you have women in the age category of 20 to 24 years who are presently in the age category of 20 to 24 years, and women in the 18-19 category. Now you will observe there has been an overall decline. So this gives you an idea of what? This gives you an idea that we are moving in the right direction. But here again, you will observe that the kind of improvement which happened between NFHS 3 and NFHS 4, that has kind of plateaued. So that is why various states, they are thinking about out-of-the-box solutions, and one of such solutions have been devised by the Odisha government. This also gives you an idea when you are writing an answer regarding this, when you are creating an answer of maybe 250 words, this gives you an idea that when you write the way forward, you have to encapsulate that more needs to be done by the states in order to continue that downward trend. Okay? Now, another data, if you look at, gives you an idea about why this issue is prevalent. Why is it that child marriages are happening at such an alarming rate? And this particular chart gives you an idea about percentage of women aged 20 to 24 years who were married before 18 years of age by place of residence, education, and wealth index. So basically, those who had indulged in the practice of child marriage, this is a classification of data based upon their level of education, the amount of wealth or prosperity that they have, the kind of background that they come from, the societal background, and so on. And here what you find is something very interesting. You will find that basically it is an indicator. Here different colors indicate NFHS 3, 4, and 5. And here you will find something very interesting, that whenever you consider the population set that is rural, population set where either there is no education and or only primary education which is received, the population set which is poorest, poorer, and even in the case of middle income wealth index. So in these areas, you'll find that the incidences of child marriages are very high, which tells you something, and here you will be able to classify this significantly. So what are the characteristics in terms of the societal prevalence and the societal position of a family whereby someone takes the decision to marry their children at a very young age? So basically, the population is rural, illiterate, and also poverty. So these can always be thought to be. Now please understand, just because you write here rural does not mean that all and everybody living in rural India, they are indulging in this activity. Please understand that along with the rural population, the aspect of illiteracy as well as poverty, that is something which is coincidental. That is why you find a lot of population in terms of rural India. Right? Urbanization along with it brings some amount of educational betterment and also some amount of wealth index growth as indicated by the population set. So that is why please don't classify it as rural India has this problem whereas urban India does not. So these are the main drivers which push people at marrying at a very younger age. Now, when looked at the entire country and the different states of the country, how have the various states of the country performed during the NFHS 3, 4, and 5 data? That again paints a very interesting picture. While in the NFHS 3 data, as you can see here, this is NFHS 3. This data indicates that you had the problem which was pervasive almost in the entirety of the country. Yes, the amount of incidence of the problem that was slightly varying in some parts of the country, but it was pervasive across the length and breadth of the country. Then, NFHS 4, the situation slightly improved. You would observe that you had the states like Odisha, Chhattisgarh, Telangana, Maharashtra, who significantly improved themselves. And by the time that we come to NFHS 5, you find this improvement to be much more substantial. And now you only have few of the laggard states which are present. For example, you have Bihar, you have Assam, you have Jharkhand, you have Tripura, and you also have West Bengal. So as of NFHS 5, these are the only states where the problem is still very, very significant. That is why you are seeing the level of action that the Assam government is taking, because obviously nobody wants to stay in that list. You would never want to stay in the list of the laggards, even in your section, let alone the entire country. So that is why Assam is taking these harsh steps. And that is what raises the question. Look at Odisha. Odisha here has significantly improved from its earlier situation. And in this case of the state of Odisha, you still have many areas which do not have infrastructural connectivity to the level which is required. Many areas are still isolated, many areas are still slightly backward. So Odisha must have done something right which is working for them. And that can be a case exemplar for the rest of the country to follow and rest of the states to pay heed to that. So let us take a look at the steps which the Odisha government has taken. First of all the districts, they have been tasked with the main job of tracking the absence of girls in schools and villages. And thereby they report these numbers to the district administration, who then send the representatives to the local community, to the family members for counseling. Now, why is it in order to prevent child marriage, you are tracking education and dropout rates? Because earlier we had seen that literacy has got a direct relation. Even if you manage to improve, and this is something which is backed by result as indicated in NFHS 5 data itself. That is why I'm encouraging you that the next time such data is released, go through it in detail. So this data was backed by a research which indicated that even if the years whereby the number of years that a girl or a boy does spend in the schooling, that is, if the years of schooling is increased even by 1 year, the percentage of population who indulge in child marriages, that decreases drastically. So the impact of education is very significant. And also, Odisha government has basically made up and woven through an entire platform. And that platform does have all the various schemes targeting the betterment of the girl child. So basically, Advika, Every Girl is Unique, is a platform linking all schemes targeting girls from the age 10 to 19 years. Now, thereby, you also have the demarcation of the villages as child marriage free village. Just like you have open defecation free villages and open defecation free areas, just like that, Odisha has also started a movement whereby based upon certain parameters, villages are declared child marriage free. Now that in itself brings about a kind of a competitive analysis and a kind of a competitive behavior where each district, each block and each taluka would always want to do much better, right? At least better than their immediate neighbors. Then there are also monetary incentives for PVTGs or particularly vulnerable tribal groups, where you also find a lot of these incidences of child marriage. So these are few of the steps aimed at removing this scourge that the society is facing. But along with that, you also have the government engaging with the community, and along with counseling, you also have members of the district administration engaging directly with the local community, with the tribal heads, with the panchayats, and thereby trying to encourage them not to practice this anymore. So, especially girls in the age group of 15 to 18, they are the ones who require particular amount of counseling, particular amount of information, because please understand, child marriage is not only one of the social issues that we are facing. Because of child marriage, there are health implications which also throw themselves into the picture. How? So when a young girl is actually married off, thereby you have unwanted pregnancies that she has to deal with. And at that point of time, the human body is not capable enough to handle such kind of complications. Many of the times it leads to poor health of the young one who is born, or the maternal health is something which deteriorates. And also because of being married and getting married at a much younger age, in many of the areas we also observe you have multiple such pregnancies, leading to a larger fertility rate in the population as well. We already know that in a country where we have close to around 50 to 53% of the girls suffering from the problem of anemia, the child who is born, that child also suffers from that problem, and that continues for perpetuity. So the aim should be to have lesser number of kids but the healthy ones, right? That in a way demarcates the prosperous society. So that is why counseling of girls for their own health, for their own education, that becomes very relevant, which the district administration engages in. Now, the police administration, that has also been roped in Odisha. Now in Assam also, the police has been roped in. But the police there is taking a hard measure, a hard step of putting people behind bars as of now. So here in Odisha, what is done is that the inspectors in charge of the police stations, they have been assigned a job of conducting monthly meetings in the community to discuss dropping out from school and child marriage with the representatives of the local community. And each of the police stations, they are asked with, or they are basically tasked with certain number of areas, blocks, talukas, panchayats, etc., which they end up adopting. And when they adopt that, they ensure that in those areas, the problem of child marriage is basically uprooted from the very, very bottom. Then, police stations were made child-friendly so that girls who otherwise in certain cases are forcibly put into the practice of child marriage, or who are married off at a very young age, the police stations have been made child-friendly so that they can approach the police directly and seek justice for themselves. And the police also took up an awareness program, and that is basically Kishori Jagrukta Saptah. So thereby again, the police is trying to raise the awareness. Now these modus operandi, or the method of operation, that gives you an idea about what needs to be done ideally. Ideally, one needs to target both the problem at its root by looking at educational setup and also ensuring that there are fewer dropouts from the school, there is a better enrollment ratio and an enrollment rate, then ensuring that the health parameters are up to the mark, then ensuring that enough awareness is raised, then ensuring that the local community that is made a part of it, that is not alienated, because if you alienate the local community, they will never come on board and they will never be able to make it a success. And along with that, there always comes a program or a scheme to raise awareness. Now, here the communication has been issued around a loss of education, health issues, and so on that we have talked about. An example that I was telling you, that the police are basically adopting many villages. The police in the region of Jharsuguda, thereby they have adopted 44 villages, and their job is to make these model villages in purpose. Now, community engagement has been done, and as a result of this, few of the communities that you see, few of the communities, they have made an open declaration that in their community, child marriage won't be encouraged. But does not mean that if the communities are issuing this warning or issuing this diktat, does not mean that from tomorrow itself the problem will be solved. Slowly and steadily, the society imbibes that mindset of letting the girl child grow on her own. Slowly and steadily, the society graduates from a low education as well as a low wealth economy to that of a high education, high information and literacy level, to also better health standards. So it is going to be a slow process. It is up to us that how do we achieve that slow process. Ideally, when you are writing a way forward for your answer, you have to talk about a mixture of both these long-term measures as well as the fear of the law. In many of the areas, unless and until you do not have the fear of the law, you will find many of them easily flouting the norms regardless of the societal convictions and the societal guidelines issued. So that is why the way forward has to be a mix of the two. Okay? Now, after that, we come to the second topic of the day, and second topic of the day is related to your GS paper 2. It has appeared in the editorial, that is page 8 of the newspaper, and this is the curious case of disqualification of a politician. So here, this is a developing news story, and you will find the follow-up news stories about it coming in the month and two again, as this issue has been raked up in front of the Honorable Supreme Court as well. So let us discuss what this editorial article is about and what are the problems and the questions that it throws in front of Indian democratic setup. So here, to understand the context, first of all, let us understand that why we are discussing this. So the Kerala High Court had made a judgment whereby it had suspended, the Kerala High Court in the judgment suspended the verdict which was earlier issued by the Kavarati District and Sessions Court of Lakshadweep. Okay, so the Kavarati District and Session Court of Lakshadweep, what it had done is, basically it had convicted a sitting member of parliament, that is the NCP leader Mohammad Faisal PP. He was sentenced to 10 years in jail, right? And thereby, once he was sentenced to 10 years in jail, automatically, as per the provisions in RPI, that is Representations of People's Act 1951, that person was disqualified, because once you are convicted, you will be disqualified from your position, right? And that individual, that member of parliament, took this matter to the Kerala High Court, and the Kerala High Court basically stayed that decision. A bit more of fact, if you will take a look into this, basically, Mr. Faisal was convicted by the Kavarati court on January 11 for attempt to murder. Now that is a very, very serious charge, attempt to murder, and sentenced to 10 years imprisonment. Immediately, that is January 13th, Lok Sabha announced that he was disqualified as an MP with effect from the date of conviction, as per the provisions of what? Representations of People Act 1951. Then on January 18, the Election Commission of India fixed February 27 as the date for by-election in that constituency, because obviously when you are disqualified, that particular seat is vacated, right? I as an individual, let's say I am an MP of a particular area, a particular district. Now if I am disqualified, that district does not have an elected representative, so a by-election needs to be held. So the Election Commission had already decided upon a date, that is February 27th, on which the by-election will be held, right? Now in the meanwhile, Mr. Faisal appealed to the Kerala High Court for a stay in his conviction and sentence, which the High Court suspended on January 25, which means that his conviction stands suspended. Understand this term. Conviction stands suspended. Meaning what? Meaning the High Court will take another look at the entire issue, maybe, and thereby after that the High Court will be able to decide whether that conviction is valid or not. In the meantime, the disqualification which had happened earlier, that disqualification is null and void now, because that person can no longer be termed as a convict. That person will only be termed as an individual who has cases under trial pending conviction. So the entire issue of disqualification which had been done, that disqualification now stands at a moot point. Now, by the way, when we talk about disqualification of an individual, from the parliament or from the state legislature, you have very crystal clear articles given in the constitution which deal with the same. You have Article 102, which gives you an idea about disqualification in the case of the parliament, and along with that you also have Article 191, which deals with disqualification cases in the case of state legislature. Right? Disqualification of members from the state legislature, that is dealt by Article 191. Now here, you have the basic conditionalities which are spelled out under which an individual can be suspended or can be disqualified. So, a person shall be disqualified for if he holds any office of profit, if he is of unsound mind, if he is an undischarged insolvent, that is, if that individual goes completely bankrupt and and that person is unable to pay off the impending debts that he has, that also stands as a point of disqualification, and is not able to pay the debts that he owes to many people. Then if he is not a citizen of India or has voluntarily acquired the citizenship of any other particular country, because we don't have the dual citizenship thing in our country, then if he is so disqualified by or under any law made by the parliament, and it is here that the Representation of People's Act 1951 that comes in, because that act tells you that if and when an individual is convicted of a crime, thereby immediately disqualification follows, and once a person is disqualified, that seat is termed and is understood to be void and vacant, and by-elections can be conducted. Now, a person shall be disqualified for being a member of either House of Parliament if he is already disqualified under the 10th schedule. The 10th schedule, which deals with the anti-defection part, that also serves as an apt basically subject in order to term or tender a kind of a disqualification. Now here, the Kerala High Court, when it basically put a stay order or basically it suspended the conviction, why did it do so? So the Kerala High Court was very clear, because Kerala High Court is also cognizant of the fact that attempt to murder and 10 years imprisonment is not a small thing to be convicted about, right? So thereby, if you are convicted of something, still the Kerala High Court is putting a kind of a suspension on the conviction. Why is it so? That is driven by two basic principles that the Kerala High Court has very clearly stated as well. One of the basic is the cost of elections, and here we are referring to the by-election. Okay, if let's suppose there is a by-election which is conducted, that by-election won't be an easy job or won't be a cheap process. You will have a lot of people, personnel who will be deployed, and there will be a lot of mobilization of various different officials, the things and goods to be transported from one area to another, the counting process, etc. So it is a costly endeavor. It is not a cheap endeavor, and that is basically borne by the taxpayer. So there again comes a predicament that do we engage in such costly endeavors and processes time and time again. And secondly, if you conduct a by-election right now, we do know that for the member of the parliament, the elections are due next year. That is, in the month of May 2024, you will have the general elections which shall be held. So any individual who is even, let's say, elected as a result of that by-election will have how much time in front of them? Will have only a brief 15 months. Right? So the new guy or the new person who is elected, that new person will have only 15 months of tenure before going on into the next election, and 15 months obviously is a very limited time to make any sort of change, any sort of difference. So keeping these two in mind, Kerala High Court came up with the opinion that the entire process should be suspended in a way that the conviction should not be made as the term of immediate disqualification. And that has provided Mr. Faisal with a window whereby he can appeal his case again. Now, this particular conundrum that you see, that conundrum is not something which is new in Indian polity. And this matter has been taken up to the Supreme Court significantly. Now, here, as I told you, the law which has been crafted, which has been created by the Parliament in order to take care of the disqualification of the convicted members, that is as per the RPI, Representations of People Act 1951, that provides that a person will be disqualified if convicted and sentenced to imprisonment for 2 years or more. Any kind of conviction which leads to imprisonment of 2 years or more, that means you will be disqualified from your membership to the Parliament. The person is disqualified for the period of imprisonment and a further 6 years. So let's say the imprisonment is for 10 years, as is the case. Right? As is the case with Mr. Faisal. Now, as per the Representations of People's Act, Mr. Faisal will be disqualified for a period of 10 years plus 6 years. And that will be 16 years of disqualification, whereby he won't be able to stand for another election. Now, there is an exception for the sitting members. The sitting members who are already a part of the Parliament, they have a period of 3 months from the date of conviction to appeal. It is using this provision that Mr. Faisal has actually filed for an appeal. And the disqualification will not be applicable until the appeal is decided. But in this case, the disqualification was issued by the Lok Sabha within 2 days. By-elections were actually announced by the Election Commission again within a fortnight. So that again stands in contravention of the last clause that we see. Now, when these matters have been taken up to the Supreme Court earlier as well, the Supreme Court has made certain judgments. Now, for the first time when this was taken up to the Supreme Court, the last clause that we saw, that was raised as a question, that for other candidates who are trying to stand for the election, you have a kind of a parameter that if you are convicted, immediately disqualification along with the number of years of imprisonment plus 6 years, all these stringent norms that you have passed. But about the sitting candidates, for the sitting candidates, you have provided a distinction that you have given 3 months of extension in which they can file an appeal. So, the litigants, they asked and they put up the question in front of the Supreme Court that, look, you are not treating the people equally. If one has got 3-month window, the other person should also be given 3-month window, or nobody should be given. So that is where Supreme Court made an observation under the judgment. So basically, the differential treatment of the candidates for elections and sitting members was challenged under Article 14, right to equality. Now, a constitution bench was made and was formed, and basically in the case K. Prabhakaran versus P. Jayarajan, the court basically took a decision that it does not contravene Article 14, and here the conditions of the sitting members are slightly different as compared to the normal candidates. How? Let's suppose we consider any particular government in power. Now, if let's say 2 people in that government, and let's assume that the government is on a very thin majority. Now, if let's say 2 people are convicted, and that conviction has happened by the Sessions Court. Now, immediately, if you disqualify them, that means the government will fall, and that can bring about instability in the governance system itself. Maybe when you consider state legislatures which have very few seats, where the margin is always very small between the members of the opposition and the members of the ruling party and the ruling government, you'll find that even one legislator here or there, that can make a difference between being in the government and being in the opposition. So in such conditions, people need to be provided with that window. At least that is what the Supreme Court said in the Prabhakaran versus Jayarajan case. Now, the court considered whether in a case of disqualified candidate who is later acquitted, the disqualification would be removed with the retrospective effect. What does that mean? That means that, let's say, I as an individual have been convicted. I have been disqualified. Now, within that 3-month window, I go to the court and basically I appeal again. And the court, after hearing all the pros and cons, the court basically overturns the conviction, and now let's say I as an individual am acquitted of those charges. Now in the meanwhile, if the by-elections have been held in my constituency, what will happen then? Will the by-elections be cancelled, and will my disqualification be removed from a retrospective date? The court said that basically you cannot cancel an election, and that results of the elections once declared, that cannot be cancelled, and hence the disqualification will never be taken at a retrospective date. Disqualification should always and will always be taken from a prospective date. Now, further again, after 2005, in 2013, again, you had the very famous case of Lily Thomas versus Union of India. There again, the same issues were discussed, and the same questions were put forward in front of the court for disqualification charges. And again considered whether this exception which was provided to the existing lawmakers, whether that was constitutionally invalid. And what did the court opine in that case? The court basically came up with the fact that Article 102 empowers Parliament to make a law regarding disqualification of a person. Now, which law? The Representations of People Act that we saw, right? Now, it interpreted this particular phrase as indicated in Article 102. Remember, in Article 102, we basically saw that here, under any law made by Parliament, an individual can be disqualified. We looked at this. Now, this particular phrase was interpreted by the court in a way that Parliament could specify conditions for disqualification. Those conditions would apply equally to the candidates and the sitting members. Means the candidates who are appearing for elections and the sitting members, both of them, for both of them you should have the equal crucible and the equal parameter. And the judgment further cited that, look, Article 101, what does it tell you? Article 101 tells you that if a member of Parliament was disqualified under Article 102, his seat shall thereupon become vacant. Now, if the seat is vacant, fresh elections have to be announced, and thereby by-elections have to be conducted. So basically here you see the court going in a different direction as compared to the Jayarajan case. And the court took a fact and court took a cognizance of the matter that both the elected members and the candidates should not only be held at the same crucible, but also the seat will be held as vacant, and furthermore elections can be announced. Now, what is the way forward in this case? Now, over a period of time, various different cases have been observed, and in the article, the very famous case of the MP, that is Navjot Singh Sidhu, that has been cited. Now, in the case of Navjot Singh Sidhu, he was also convicted of a crime. And basically, once you are convicted of a crime, disqualification follows. But he immediately filed an appeal. And based upon the appeal, that conviction got suspended. And once the conviction got suspended, he could fight elections again. So, in a way, this becomes a kind of a procrastination, whereby the lawmakers, they are now being able to trust the judicial system of our country in such a reliable way that the time by which the results of that case are announced, I would have won 2 to 3 elections in the meanwhile. So for them, it becomes very, very convenient to file an appeal to get a kind of a stay order. But that in itself is a travesty of justice in front of our very own eyes. So that is where the conviction, once it happens, how the members should be dealt with, that is something which the Parliament has to decide. The court in many cases has basically turned the ball to the Parliament that this is your area, legislative area, where you have to legislate, where you have to make a law regarding appeals, regarding suspensions, etc. So moving ahead into the future, rather than letting the parliamentarians and the politicians use this tool of RPI Act in order to stay in the political system regardless of the convictions, one needs to be very, very sure to ensure that if you want a clean political system, under no circumstances Can we allow, can we permit the convicted members to become the part of the mighty parliament which all of us hold very proud and very dear to ourselves? So in this article, what is it that we have seen? We have seen the conditions for disqualification, right? Both in the case of the parliament and the state legislature, the law which has been framed according to that, what are the provisions of the law. We have seen what has happened in the case of the Kerala High Court. Why is it that Kerala High Court has made these observations? In order to save money, in order to basically be fair enough for the new candidate who is going to be elected in. So that is a problem which will persuade and which will prevail longer. And we also saw the relevant cases where the Supreme Court has made judgments in this issue as well. Okay? Now, after this, we move on to the next article. The next article that you observe, that is in page 9 of the Delhi edition, and this again is related with GS paper 3. Now in this, basically, here, this article throws a light at the paradoxes that unfold themselves in front of our very own eyes. Now this article, very beautifully, it tells you initially about the fact that the city of Hyderabad over the past 2 years has emerged a powerhouse of infrastructure growth in Telangana. But at the same time, Hyderabad has been bagging laurels across the globe and bagging multiple awards with regards to eco-friendly conditionalities which prevail. Now here, it also throws something very interesting. It tells you that wherever you go in Hyderabad, you will find citizens who are protesting against the felling of trees, encroachments, etc. But still at the same time, Hyderabad is gaining so much amount of recognition for the green initiatives. Something is not matching up. And that is what this article pins the head at. Now here, if you take a look at it, the Telangana government over a period of time has been launching multiple different initiatives to improve the green cover in the country and in the state in particular. Now we all know that as per our national forest policy was issued when? As per the provisions of national forest policy. This was basically given in 1988. Now, as per this policy, the aim that has been set for the entire country is that we are going to achieve greenery or forest cover overall in 33% of the area of the country. As of now, how much of area is forested? What do you think? How much of area is forested in our country as of now? It is around 25%. Good. So as of now, you have 25% which is forested, and that has to increase to 33% of the area. So that is why various state governments have also launched a program in order to take the forest cover up till 33%. Under this, the state government of Telangana has launched the program Telangana Ku Haritaharam, whereby it is basically endeavored to set up a kind of a green corridor, the outer ring road in the entirety of the vicinity of the cities such as Hyderabad and so on, and a kind of a green garland of Telangana. And this has been done to increase the forest cover and the green cover up till 33% in the state of Telangana. Along with this, the Telangana government has also embarked upon the program of urban forestry. And in this program of urban forestry, it is encouraging the plantation activities being carried out in the midst of the city in order to establish green spaces within the city in order to mitigate the various issues that the region faces. And basically, for these programs, it has garnered and gathered a lot of awards. One of the awards is the Arbor Day Foundation's Tree City of the World Award. The other award that you see, that is the World Green City Award given by International Association of Horticultural Producers. Now, in this, Hyderabad was competing with cities such as Mexico City, Montreal, Paris, and Bogota as well. So imagine Hyderabad emerges a winner. Now also, you had Living Green for Economic Recovery and Inclusive Growth category. There also, IAHP provided the award to Hyderabad. Now, On the face of it, first of all, these awards are relevant for your prelims. Very, very relevant for your prelims. You should be aware that which are the awards which have been received. Now, Hyderabad is the only city in our country to have received these awards. So easily a question can be framed in the prelims that which of the cities of the country have been given this award. So you would have multiple cities in the option and you have to select the correct one. So easy prelims type questions can be framed from this area. Now, if we take a look at this award in itself, that also becomes relevant for your prelims. So when you consider the Tree City of the World given by Arbor Day Foundation, that in itself is a program partnership between FAO, right, Food and Agriculture Organization, along with Arbor Day Foundation, which is a non-profit organization which encourages people to go for afforestation and planting activities. Now, it is an international effort to recognize cities and towns committed to urban forests and maintenance of the ecosystem. Remember, I told you about the urban forestry program of the Telangana government. That is one of those for which Hyderabad has been bagging these awards. Now, a city is evaluated on few of the standards, that is establish responsibility to set up the green cover, set the procedure, how you will set up the green cover, know what you already have in terms of soil moisture, etc. How do you retain them? How do you make the greenery possible, and so on. Now, here in this article, a paradox, and few of the paradoxes have also been cited. One of the paradoxes, reports regularly cite instances of fully grown trees being cut away, and Hyderabad bagging all these awards, and trees are being cut away simultaneously. You have recently, you had the incidents or the entire celebration of Formula E, the Formula E Prix, which was held in Hyderabad. That also basically brought about cutting off many different trees in that locality. And also in various different areas, citizens are campaigning to save nearly 900 banyan trees, 900 banyan trees, which are close to around 100 years old. So imagine the plight. Now, the state faces challenges of encroachment into forest land by the indigenous people as well. So amongst all this, how is it that the state is bagging all these awards is what many people are wondering. Now, analysis was done based upon what are the parameters on which we have been given or we have received this award. It was found out that in many of the cases, the district administration or the state administration would simply chart out the various different figures, data pointers about the trees which have been planted, and there was no audit, no verification, no inspection, and just based on those data pointers, awards have been given. Now, questions are being raised. How authentic are those data provided? See, not only is it absolutely wrong to fudge the data, it also gives you a false sense of complacency that, okay, we have so much amount of greenery where in reality we don't. So that is why there needs to be certain measures which need to be taken in order to get rid of the issue. First of all, a third-party audit of the data has to be conducted. That how many areas are green enough in actual proportion rather than what you see on the papers. Because in India, all of us are aware that in many parts of the country, you have many areas which have been declared as green areas, many areas where the canals are flowing as per the government records, but in reality, you have nothing but barren land in there. So a third-party audit is absolutely a must. Then, a measurement of the trees standing rather than the numbers planted, because in the afforestation drives, let's say you have planted 100 saplings. Out of that, let's say only 50 survive. So you cannot say that we have grown 100 trees. You have managed to grow only around 50 trees. So if you show that in the record, then the reality will be something very different. So that is why you have to count out how many trees have actually survived, how many saplings have actually survived. Now, in order to demarcate greener areas and in order to ensure urban forestry hits its potential, you have to ensure as a particular state, as a particular city, that you have your long-term plan in place. That is what Hyderabad should look like moving ahead in 2040 or maybe even 2045. Accordingly, if proper planning is done, not only will you be able to rid the particular region of congestion, of traffic jams, of pollution, etc., at the same time, you will be able to allocate sufficient areas for greenery, and reaching that mark of green city will be much more easier. So these are few of the things that should be done, that needs to be done, rather than simply sitting behind and feeling pride that our city has been given this award. And that is the crux of the article that you see in this. Now, moving ahead into the last article of the day, and that is about the sickle cell anemia. Now, this sickle cell anemia, which has been very, very prevalent in many parts of the country, along with the many parts of the world, we have to understand what it is and what is it that the government is doing for it. And is there any kind of a specification where you do observe people suffering from SCA or sickle cell anemia? First of all, what is it? So in this, in a very basic condition, if you have to understand, sickle cell, the cell, the blood in itself has got various parts, right? Various constituents. I hope we are aware that the blood has red blood cells, RBCs, WBCs, the white blood cell, the platelets, the plasma, right? So all of that, within the RBCs, you have the hemoglobin which is present. Now that is responsible for carrying the various different nutrients into the cells of the body. Now sickle cell, the cell in itself is damaged, right? So here, basically what happens is that hemoglobin, which is tasked generally with carrying oxygen to all parts of the body, has got two different constituents, subunits, 2 alpha and 2 beta protein markers that are present. Now, in some people, mutations in the gene that happens, that creates the beta subunits and thereby impacts the shape of the blood cell and distorts it, and that appears like a sickle. So a normal blood cell would look something like this, the RBC. The normal RBC would look something like this. But if there are some kind of genetic defections, genetic mutations, then the cell, rather than being a circular one, that turns into a sickle shape. So that is a sickle cell anemia. Now, why is this an issue? After all, these are still cells nonetheless. Because please understand, when you consider the various different veins, capillaries, etc., which connect the body to the various parts, the various cells of the body, thereby you have to understand that the rounded cells, they are easily able to navigate and move to the different parts. Whereas the sickle cells, these are unable to move sufficiently in a significantly fluent manner. So that is why in many of the areas and many of the cells, the blood does not even reach, leading to premature death of many cells of the body. And slowly and steadily, oxygen is not carried out to the various parts of the body, and the body starts suffering. So that is the sickle cell anemia. Now this sickle cell anemia, basically here, as you can see, the sickle cells also tend to die early, resulting in a shortage of RBCs, which deprive the body of oxygen, as we have talked about. Now these obstructions, they cause fatigue, acute chest syndrome, then stroke, and a host of other health complications due to a lack of oxygen in the body. Now here, does it affect only some, or is it a particular kind of illness that is prevalent across the entirety of the population? So here you will observe that various analysis as well as the data pointers indicated by the different numerous researches which have been carried out, that indicate that it is a problem which is more prevalent amongst the tribal population as compared to the non-tribals, right? The problem of hemoglobin defect, that is more prevalent in the case of the tribal population. Research has shown that SCA, that is the sickle cell anemia, is prevalent in communities residing in areas where malaria is endemic. It has also been found that in various different states and union territories of our country, where you have a lot of prevalence of malaria in particular, particularly amongst the tribal communities, there you have a lot of incidences of this SCA or this anemia. And here the people, they get an immunity, a kind of immunity to malaria as well. It has also been found out that in countries of Africa, you have many different people who suffer from this SCA, they are naturally immune to even the lethal varieties of malaria. So it provides a kind of a natural immunity against malaria. Additionally, the prevalence is higher that practice endogamy, that within the same community, if the marriages occur, then there is a greater chance that the offspring who will be born will also have sickle cell anemia. So it is in these sections of the population where you find greater prevalence of sickle cell anemia. Now, can it be treated? Anything can be treated. But then, a very easy treatment has yet not been devised so far. Basically, the only cure comes in the form of either gene therapy, because it is a kind of a genetic mutation which causes this, isn't it? So either the gene therapy whereby the chromosomes are doctored, or stem cell transplants. In many of the cases, what is also done is that you have blood transfusion which is done, whereby the perfectly healthy blood cells that are basically given in to the body of the patient. But that also comes with its own associated problems of cost, of infections, and also of the blood not being accepted readily by the patient. So that is why it also comes with its own problems. Now, what does that mean? So if the cure is so complicated, and the impacted population is the tribal population, which in general can be assumed to have a lower economic level and lower economic capability, you can always think about it that the solution can be provided only with the help of government support. So what is it that the government is doing? So the government basically, in this budget, you had the finance minister declaring the overall aim that we as a country, we will be free of SCA, that is the sickle cell anemia, by the year 2047. So a kind of a 25-year timeline has been established by the government. Right, but then here you have the ICMR, the Indian Council of Medical Research, and NRHM, National Rural Health Mission, in different states. What they are doing is they are undertaking outreach program for the better management and control of the disease, because right now the problem is also of identification. Do we know where these diseases are very pervasive and where are they very prevalent? Then Ministry of Tribal Affairs, because you have the tribal population being impacted significantly. So automatically the Ministry of Tribal Affairs also gets involved, launched a portal wherein people can register themselves, and if they have the disease, they can basically write it here, declare it here, and in order to collate all the information, because so that we get the absolute and appropriate traits that people indicate who have this disease, so that better research can be carried out, so that cure can be found out. Now, in the budget, the health minister said that the government plans to distribute special cards across tribal areas to people below the age of 40 who suffer from this, based upon a special screening, who suffer from this disease, in order to map out the incidence and the spread of that disease so that it can be controlled. And now the money for this will come from the National Health Mission. Right, from National Health Mission. So as you can see, till now the steps taken by the government are only in the form of identifying the issue and understanding its spread. We need to have a better development in terms of drug research, in terms of pharmaceuticals, in terms of understanding in a better way why these mutations happen, so that we can put an end to it. We have to understand that in our country you have a lot of people who are not even aware that they suffer from sickle cell anemia, because it is a genetic one and it has got implications and manifestations in various different forms. So a lot of people are not even aware. So once we chart out the entire spread, which these steps are going to do, along with that, simultaneously, drug research and pharmaceutical research needs to be augmented, needs to be carried out, so that this is a disease which can be cut from the bud itself, and at the same time understand what are the virtues of this anemic red blood cell, so that it provides a natural immunity against malaria as well, because that also can further be incentivized, that also can further be programmed into a better immunity program for the young ones as well. Okay, so that is what we saw in the case of sickle cell anemia, regarding what it is, where is it most prevalent and what is it that the government is undertaking. Now, taking a quick look at the type of questions. So what is sickle cell anemia? Discuss the unique traits of disease in terms of its prevalence and the steps initiated by the government in order to control the disease. So this is a very direct question. The introduction has to include the portion of sickle cell anemia. That is something which has to be given in the introduction part. In the body part, you immediately follow from the introduction and you start with few of the characteristics of this SCA. What happens, what are the protein markers that we have talked about, what are the implications of it, in which portion of the population you find them, try to write them in a point-wise format, and eventually come to the portion of what the government is doing. In conclusion, try to bring about a couple of sentences about way forward which needs to be followed, and that will complete your answer and you will get a very good marks. Then in the second question, discuss the provisions dealing with the disqualification of members from the parliament. So here you don't have to discuss Article 191. Here you have to discuss with Article 102. Along with that, you also have to discuss the Representation of People's Act 1951. Because here you have provisions, not the article of the Constitution. So provisions anywhere. So Representation of People Act 1951 along with Article 102, that needs to be provided. Then highlight the recent judgments of Supreme Court. So here you have to talk about the conundrum indicated by the Jayarajan case as well as the Lily Thomas case, and what are the further implications. You can give the example of the Navjot Singh Sidhu case, whereby the conviction was basically suspended. As long as you are providing examples in the questions of polity and governance, the better your answer becomes and the more authentic it becomes, and more marks is what you score. So that is all that we have from our side for the analysis. I hope this was fruitful enough for you. I hope that you have understood the aspects that we have discussed. Now I suggest and encourage all of you to take up that quiz on our Telegram channel and to understand it furthermore. If you have liked the content, please don't forget to click on the like, share and subscribe, and in the comment section leave behind the comment regarding what you thought about the session in itself. So that will be all from my side. Take care of yourself. Thank you and a goodbye.